The wind off Lake Geneva cut through my coat like it wasn't there at all. February in Switzerland meant the kind of cold that made your bones ache, the kind that reminded you how small you were against the indifferent world. I pulled my threadbare scarf tighter and hurried toward the amber glow of Le Jardin de Hiver, the restaurant where I'd been waiting tables for 8 months. The tips were good when wealthy tourists felt generous. Tonight, I needed them to feel very generous. My phone buzzed in my pocket, grandmother's hospice again. I'd call back during my break. The thought of her in that narrow bed, machines beeping their steady rhythm, made my chest tight. The bills were mounting faster than my paychecks could cover, and the Swiss healthcare system was efficient but merciless about payment schedules. I slipped through the service entrance, shaking snow from my hair. The kitchen was already chaos, Chef Laurent barking orders in rapid French, line cooks dancing around each other with practiced precision. I tied my apron, checked my reflection in the steel backsplash. Presentable, invisible, exactly what this job required. "Myra, front section tonight," the floor manager said without looking up from his tablet. "We have a private party in the conservatory, high profile, no mistakes." High profile meant better tips. I nodded and grabbed my order pad. The conservatory was the restaurant's crown jewel, all glass walls and hanging lights that made the snow outside look like something from a fairy tale instead of a threat. 8 men in expensive suits occupied the circular table, their conversation low and careful. Security stood at discreet distances. This wasn't business. This was power. I approached with water glasses, eyes down. That was the trick, be useful without being noticed. They barely glanced at me as I poured. Their Italian was too quick for my rusty comprehension, but I caught fragments, contracts, timelines. Someone named Romano who'd overstepped. One man sat with his back to the window. I only saw his profile as I filled his glass, but it was enough. Sharp jawline, dark hair swept back, a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. He didn't speak as much as the others. When he did, they listened. I retreated to place their dinner orders. The kitchen's heat was a mercy after the conservatory's glass chill. My phone buzzed again. This time I checked it. "Grandmother asking for you. Can you visit tonight after shift? Nurse Claudine." My throat tightened. I typed back, "On my way as soon as I clock out." The evening blurred into the rhythm I knew by heart. Deliver courses, clear plates, refill glasses, vanish. The men's conversation grew more animated with the wine. I caught one of them glancing at his watch repeatedly, agitated. Then my phone rang. Not buzzed, rang loud and shrill from my apron pocket. Horror flooded through me. I'd forgotten to silence it after texting. Every head in the conservatory turned. "I'm so sorry," I stammered, fumbling for the phone. But grandmother's name glowed on the screen, and some instinct made me answer instead of declining. "Bunica." My grandmother's voice came through weak and thready, speaking Romanian, our language, the one she'd taught me in her cramped Bucharest apartment before we'd immigrated. She was confused, asking where my grandfather was. He'd been dead 5 years. I stepped away from the table, turning toward the glass wall, switching fully into Romanian to soothe her. "I'm coming soon. You're safe. Nurse Claudine is there. I'll be there in an hour, I promise." Behind me, I heard a chair scrape. I ended the call, turned back with apologies already forming, and found the man from the window standing 3 feet away. Up close he was devastating. Not handsome in a magazine way, too sharp for that. Too much intelligence behind dark eyes that assessed me with unnerving focus. His cologne reached me, something with cedar and smoke. "Romanian," he said, not a question. "Yes, I'm so sorry, it won't happen again, You speak it fluently." "It's my first language," my heart hammered. I was going to be fired. High-profile guests didn't tolerate disruptions. He studied me for another moment, then reached into his jacket. I flinched before I could stop myself. He noticed. His hand emerged with a business card, not a weapon. "Dante Corvino," he said. I need someone who speaks fluent Romanian for a project. Are you available? I stared at the card. Heavy stock minimalist design, just a name and a phone number. I'm a waitress. I can see that. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. The position pays 50,000 euros for 3 months' work. Translation mostly. Some cultural consultation. 50,000 euros. That was more than I made in a year. That was grandmother's medical bills and rent and food and maybe enough left over to breathe. What kind of translation? I asked carefully. Business dealings. I have interests in Romania. I need someone who understands not just the language but the culture, the unspoken rules. His gaze hadn't left my face. You're observant. You notice things. That's valuable. Everything in me screamed that this was too good to be true. Men like him didn't offer desperate waitresses life-changing money without strings. But grandmother's voice on the phone, confused and frightened, echoed in my head. I need to think about it, I said. Of course. He gestured to the card still in my hand. Call me tomorrow. The position starts immediately if you accept. He returned to his table. I stood there for a heartbeat too long, then forced myself back into motion. The rest of the dinner service passed in a haze. The men left an hour later with a tip so generous my hands shook when I counted it. 2,000 francs, more than I made in a week. I found a note tucked under the bill, written in precise handwriting. Your grandmother's hospice care is covered through year's end. Consider it a signing bonus. DC. The floor tilted. I grabbed the table edge. He'd known. Somehow, in the space of that brief conversation, he'd found out where my grandmother was and paid her bills. That kind of reach, that kind of speed, it wasn't normal. It wasn't safe. But it was done. The hospice would call tomorrow to confirm payment, and grandmother would have the care she needed without me drowning in debt. I looked down at the business card in my pocket. Some doors, once opened, didn't close again. I took the first tram to the hospice, the city lights blurring past the windows. The note sat in my pocket like a live coal. He'd bought me before I'd even agreed, had wrapped a chain around my ankle and called it kindness. Except grandmother would have her care. The specialist she needed, the one I'd been told we couldn't afford, was suddenly possible. That wasn't nothing. That was everything. Nurse Claudine met me at the entrance, relief clear on her face. She's calmer now, asking for you helped. Grandmother's room was warm, painted in soft yellows that tried to make you forget you were in a place people came to die. She looked so small in the bed, her hair white against the pillow. When she saw me, her face lit up with that smile that had gotten me through every hard thing in my life. I pulled a chair close and took her hand. Her fingers were cold despite the room's heat. Myra Draga, she whispered, you came. Always. I smoothed her hair back. How are you feeling? Tired but better now. Her eyes, still sharp despite everything, searched my face. Something happened, tell me. I never could hide anything from her. I told her about the phone call, the man, the offer. I didn't mention the medical bills. She'd only feel guilty, and guilt was a weight she didn't need. 50,000 euros, she repeated slowly, for 3 months. It's probably dangerous. Probably, she agreed, but you're thinking about taking it. I don't know what I'm thinking. I pressed my forehead to our joined hands. It feels like a trap. Most opportunities do at first. Her thumb rubbed circles on my wrist, the way she had when I was small and scared. Your grandfather used to say that fortune favors the brave, but wisdom favors the careful. Be both, Draga. If you take this offer, keep your eyes open. What if I can't handle it? You're stronger than you think, you always have been. She squeezed my hand. But remember, you can always walk away. No amount of money is worth losing yourself. I stayed until she fell asleep, then walked back out into the cold. The city at night was a different creature, quiet, watchful. I thought about Dante Corvino's eyes, the way he'd assessed me like a problem to solve, the way he'd moved to help before I'd even accepted his offer. Acts of service, my grandmother called it. The most dangerous kind of seduction. My apartment was a studio in a neighborhood the tourist guides didn't mention. I climbed 5 flights because the elevator hadn't worked in months, unlocked 3 separate locks, and finally collapsed on my bed. The business card sat on my nightstand. I picked it up, turned it over. The back was blank. I thought about 3 more years of waiting tables, watching my tips slowly chip away at grandmother's bills while she faded. I thought about her confused voice on the phone, asking for a dead man. I thought about the way Dante Corvino had looked at me, not through me, like most of the wealthy did with service workers, but at me. Seeing something he could use, yes, but seeing me nonetheless. At midnight, I made my decision. At 8 the next morning, I called the number on the card. He answered on the first ring, Miss Albu. Of course he knew my name. I'll do it, the translation work. Excellent, a car will collect you at 10. Pack for an extended stay, we'll be traveling. Wait, I haven't. Your apartment's rent is paid through June. Your restaurant has been notified of your resignation with a generous severance. All you need to bring is yourself and whatever personal items matter to you. A pause. And pack warmer clothes. Romania in February is less forgiving than Geneva. He ended the call before I could respond. I sat on my bed, phone still pressed to my ear, heart racing. This was insane. I should call back, tell him no, reclaim whatever remained of my normal life. Instead, I pulled out my battered suitcase and started packing. The car arrived at precisely 10. Not a taxi, a Mercedes with tinted windows and a driver in a dark suit who held the door open without meeting my eyes. The interior smelled like leather and that same cedar smoke cologne. Miss Albu, the driver said as we pulled into traffic. Mr. Corvino asked me to give you this. He handed back a leather portfolio. Inside, I found a Romanian passport, mine, but renewed with a validity I hadn't paid for, along with a Swiss bank card with my name embossed on it, several contracts in both English and Romanian, and a phone. Not my old cracked screen model, but something sleek and new. The contracts were surprisingly straightforward. 3 months of translation and cultural consultation services, 50,000 euros, paid in installments, confidentiality clauses, a termination clause that let me leave with 2 weeks' notice and prorated pay. It looked legitimate. It probably was on paper. We drove past the airport, which should have alarmed me more than it did. Instead, we headed toward the private aviation section, where jets sat like sleek birds behind security fences. The driver pulled up to a gate, showed credentials, and we were waved through. Dante waited at the base of a jet's stairs, phone to his ear, speaking Italian too quickly for me to follow. He wore a different suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and he looked tired. Something about that tiredness made him seem more human, less like the untouchable figure from last night. He ended his call as I approached. Miss Albu, did you review the contracts? Yes, I clutched my suitcase handle. They seem fair. They are. I don't believe in ambiguity in business arrangements. He gestured to the jet. Shall we? Where exactly are we going? Bucharest first. I have a meeting, then Cluj-Napoca for the primary project. He studied my face. Your grandmother's specialty consultant arrives at the hospice this afternoon, Dr. Werner from Zurich. He's worked with late-stage patients for 30 years. My throat closed. You didn't have to do that. I did. You can't focus on work if you're worried about her. He started up the stairs. That's not charity, Miss Albu. That's efficiency. The jet's interior was cream leather and polished wood. A flight attendant materialized with champagne, which I declined for water. Dante settled into a seat across from me, pulling out a tablet. We'll use the flight time to brief you, he said. I have business interests in Romania, logistics primarily. Import-export. The contracts are legitimate, but the negotiations require cultural fluency that my Romanian contacts appreciate. You'll translate during meetings, advise on local customs, and help navigate situations where language barriers create problems. Import-export of what? His eyes lifted from the tablet. Various goods, electronics, textiles, automotive parts, nothing that would trouble your conscience. The way he said it made me certain there was more he wasn't saying. But the contracts had been clear. I was a translator, not a participant in whatever else his business entailed. I also need someone, he continued, who can help me with a personal matter. My mother lives in Cluj, she's deaf. My Romanian sign language is, he paused, something flickering across his face, inadequate. She's been asking to meet with Romanian cultural contacts, other deaf community members. You'll help facilitate that. I don't know Romanian Sign Language, I said. You'll learn. I've arranged a tutor who will meet us in Cluj. He set the tablet aside. My mother is important to me, Miss Albu. Helping her will be part of your duties, and it matters more than the business meetings. There it was, the real reason he'd chosen me. Not just for the language, but for this. A son who wanted to give his mother something he couldn't provide himself. It made him dangerously sympathetic. I'll do my best, I said. I know that's why you're here. He returned to his tablet. Get some rest, it's a 2-hour flight. I tried to relax, but my mind spun. 3 months ago, I'd been worried about making rent. Now I was on a private jet heading towards something I couldn't quite name, employed by a man who moved through the world like he owned it. Maybe he did. The flight attendant brought lunch, actual lunch, not the packaged sandwich I'd expected. As I ate, I watched Dante work. He was focused, efficient, occasionally making notes in the margins of documents. Every so often, his phone would buzz and he'd type quick responses. Halfway through the flight, he looked up and caught me watching. Questions, he asked. How did you find out about my grandmother so quickly? I make it my business to know the people I work with. When you answered that phone call in Romanian, I had someone pull basic information. The hospice payment was a simple call. He leaned back. You think that's invasive? I think it's thorough. Same thing, different framing. His mouth quirked. You could have said no, Miss Albu. The contract has that termination clause. You're here by choice. Was I? With grandmother's bills paid and my rent secured, walking away would mean returning that money, leaving her without care. He'd built a golden cage so quickly I'd barely seen the bars. I'm here, I agreed, because what else could I say? The plane began its descent. Through the window, Bucharest spread out below, gray and sprawling, familiar in a way that made my chest ache. I'd left at 19, chasing opportunity in Switzerland. Now I was returning as someone's employee, bought and paid for. We landed at a private terminal. Another car waited, another driver who didn't meet my eyes. Dante made 3 phone calls during the drive into the city, switching between Italian and Romanian with fluid ease. His Romanian was flawless, accent-free. He'd learned it well. The car stopped at a hotel I recognized from magazines, the kind with a doorman and marble floors and rates that would make me dizzy. Dante was already moving, his security detail materializing from a second car. Your room is 412, he told me. Rest, I'll collect you at 7 for dinner. I thought I was here to translate. Tonight is orientation, tomorrow we work. He was already walking away, phone to his ear again. My room was larger than my entire Geneva apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. A wardrobe held clothes in my size, dresses, slacks, blouses, all simple and expensive. On the bed, a garment bag with a note, for tonight. D.C. Inside was a dress the color of winter midnight, velvet and perfectly tailored. Shoes that actually fit. A jewelry box with pearl earrings. I sat on the bed, dress in my lap, and tried to remember who I'd been yesterday. That version of myself felt very far away. At 7 precisely, a knock. I opened the door in the midnight dress, feeling like an imposter. Dante's eyes tracked over me once, quick and assessing. Good, the car is waiting. Dinner was at a restaurant perched on the top floor of an office building, all windows and low lighting. We were seated at a private table overlooking the city lights. Dante ordered in Romanian without consulting me, and I didn't protest. "Tell me about your grandmother," he said once the wine arrived. "Why?" "Because she matters to you, which means she's relevant to this arrangement." He sipped his wine, "and because I'm curious." So I told him about Bunica raising me after my parents died, about her working 3 jobs to get us to Switzerland, about her teaching me that strength was quiet and love was action, about the dementia that had started stealing her slowly, leaving behind someone who looked like my grandmother but kept forgetting who I was. Dante listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "My father died when I was 12, he said finally. "My mother raised me alone. She's the strongest person I know, so I understand what you're protecting." It was the most personal thing he'd shared. I wanted to ask more, but the food arrived, course after course of Romanian dishes I hadn't tasted in years. Sarmel and mamaliga and kazanak for dessert. "You're trying to make me comfortable," I said. "Is it working?" "A little." I set down my fork. "What aren't you telling me, Mr. Corvino?" "Dante," he corrected. "And I've told you everything you need to know for now. The rest you'll learn as we go." That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. He leaned forward slightly. "I won't lie to you, Myra, but I also won't burden you with information that doesn't serve you. What I need from you is translation, cultural guidance, and help with my mother. What you need from me is money for your grandmother's care. That's the exchange, clean and clear." Except nothing about this felt clean or clear. "Tomorrow," he continued, "we drive to Cluj. You'll meet my mother. You'll start Romanian Sign Language lessons. In the evening there's a business dinner where I'll need you to translate. Simple work. And if I say no, if I use that termination clause." His expression didn't change. "Then you say no. The medical care continues regardless. That was a gift, not leverage. But I think you'll stay, Myra, because you're curious now, because you want to see what comes next." He was right, and I hated that he was right. We finished dinner in silence that felt less uncomfortable than it should have. When the car returned us to the hotel, Dante walked me to my door. "Sleep well," he said. "Tomorrow will be long." I watched him walk down the hall to his own room, then closed my door and leaned against it. What was I doing? This man had bought his way into my life in less than 24 hours. He knew where I was vulnerable and had pressed on those points with surgical precision. Every instinct I had screamed danger. But when I called the hospice to check on grandmother, Nurse Claudine told me about Dr. Werner's visit, about the new treatment plan, about how Bunica had smiled for the first time in weeks. I looked at the midnight dress hanging in the wardrobe, at the pearl earrings in their box, at the door that had opened, whether I'd wanted it to or not. Outside, Bucharest glowed against the dark. Somewhere in this city, deals were being made, power was shifting hands, and I'd just become a piece on someone's board. The question was whether I'd learn to move on my own, or whether Dante Corvino would move me where he wanted. I suspected I'd find out soon enough. The drive to Cluj-Napoca took 5 hours through mountain roads still edged with snow. Dante worked through most of it, laptop open, occasionally taking calls in Italian. I watched the landscape change from Bucharest's urban sprawl to villages that looked like they'd been sleeping for centuries, to the dramatic rise of the Carpathians. We stopped once at a rest area. While Dante stepped away to make another call, his security detail, 2 men who'd introduced themselves simply as Luca and Stefan, bought coffee. I stretched my legs, breathing air so cold it hurt. "First time back?" Luca asked. His English was accented but clear. In 7 years. It changes you, leaving and coming back. You'll see it differently now. He handed me a coffee. Mr. Corvino is a good employer, fair. Just stay professional and you'll be fine. It wasn't reassuring so much as a warning. I nodded and returned to the car. Cluj appeared in the late afternoon, the city spreading across hills with that particular Romanian mix of Ottoman spires, socialist blocks, and modern glass. We drove through the center to a residential area I'd never have been able to afford. Wide streets, old buildings beautifully maintained, courtyards hidden behind iron gates. The car stopped before one such building. Dante finally closed his laptop. "My mother knows you're coming," he said. "She's excited. She doesn't get many visitors who speak Romanian." He paused. "She can read lips in Italian, but it exhausts her. Be patient." "I will." Inside, the building was all marble and old-world elegance. We took an elevator to the 4th floor, where a single door faced us. Dante produced a key. The apartment was warm and filled with light from tall windows. Art covered the walls, not expensive pieces, but vibrant, emotional. A woman rose from the sofa, and I understood immediately where Dante had gotten his bone structure. She was perhaps 60, elegant in a simple dress, her gray hair cut short. Her eyes were the same dark intelligence as her son's, but softer. When she saw Dante, her face transformed with joy. Dante crossed to her, kissed both her cheeks, then began signing. His movements were hesitant, clearly unpracticed, but she watched patiently. When he gestured to me, I stepped forward. "Hello," I said in Romanian, speaking slowly so she could read my lips. "My name is Myra." Her smile widened. She signed something and Dante translated aloud. "She says welcome and thank you for coming. She knows this is strange, but she hopes you'll be friends." "I hope so too," I said. She gestured us to sit, then disappeared into the kitchen. Dante looked exhausted suddenly, the careful control slipping. "She never shows that I can't communicate properly with her," he said quietly. "But I know it hurts. I was 7 when she lost her hearing, an accident. My father was still alive then. He learned sign language fluently. After he died, I tried, but work, business, everything got in the way. By the time I realized how much I'd let slide, years had passed." "It's not too late," I said. "No, but I'm not a man who likes realizing his failures." He looked at me. "That's what you're fixing, Myra. Not just translation work, my failure as a son." His mother returned with a tray, coffee, and homemade cookies that smelled like my childhood. She poured carefully, then settled beside Dante and touched his arm. She signed something, and he actually smiled. "She says I'm being dramatic again, that I'm a good son who's busy, and she doesn't need me to be perfect." He signed back something brief. "I told her I hired you because you're smarter than me." She laughed, a sound without sound, all expression. Then she turned to me and began signing slowly. I shook my head apologetically. "I don't know Romanian Sign Language yet, but I'm learning. There's a tutor coming tomorrow." She nodded, then pulled out a notepad and pen. She wrote in clear Romanian, "Then I'll teach you too. I have lots of time and not enough students." Over the next hour, using that notepad and halting conversation, I learned her name was Isabella, that she'd been a pianist before losing her hearing, that she now volunteered teaching art to deaf children. She asked about my grandmother, and when I described her, Isabella wrote, "Strength recognizes strength. She raised you well." When it was time to leave for the business dinner, Dante translated his goodbyes. Isabella held my hands and signed something lengthy. Dante's expression flickered, surprise, then something deeper. In the car, I asked what she'd said. "She said you have kind eyes, but sad ones. She said to be careful that my business doesn't make them sadder." He stared out the window. "And she said she already likes you better than the last 3 assistants, so I should try not to scare you away." Should I be scared? Probably, but I'm banking on you being curious enough to stay anyway. The dinner was at a private dining room in a hotel I recognized, the former Palace, now Cluj's most exclusive venue. 8 men waited, all Romanian, all watching as Dante and I entered. The temperature in the room changed, everyone assessing. Dante introduced me simply, my translator, Miss Albu. For 3 hours, I translated a conversation about shipping routes, customs regulations, and warehouse locations. The Romanian was formal, full of euphemisms I'd never have understood if I weren't fluent in how business actually worked. They weren't discussing electronics or textiles, not really. They were discussing logistics for things that couldn't go through normal channels. But nothing illegal was said explicitly. Everything was careful, coded, deniable. Dante never threatened. He simply laid out terms, percentages, timelines, routes, with the kind of authority that made clear these weren't negotiations so much as information sessions. The Romanians agreed to everything. When it ended, one of the men, silver-haired, expensive watch, approached me while Dante spoke with another group. "You're very talented," he said in Romanian. "Corvino is lucky to have found you." "Thank you." "Tell me, what did you do before this? You don't seem like a typical translator." Everything in his tone was pleasant. Everything in his eyes was calculating. "I worked in hospitality," I said carefully. "Ah, a waitress, perhaps." At my expression, he smiled. "It's a small community, and Mr. Corvino's interests are of interest to many. I'm just surprised he'd trust someone so new to his organization with sensitive conversations. I translate words, not participate in business." "Of course, still, one wonders what he sees in you." His eyes traveled over me in a way that made my skin crawl, beyond the obvious linguistic skills. A hand appeared at the small of my back. Dante, suddenly beside me, his touch both protective and possessive. "Mr. Popescu," Dante said pleasantly in Romanian, "are you bothering my translator?" "Simply admiring your taste." Popescu's smile didn't waver. "I was just telling Miss Albu how fortunate you are." "I am." Dante's hand stayed where it was, a claim. "If you'll excuse us, we have an early morning." In the car, Dante was silent for several blocks. Then, "That was Nicolae Popescu. He runs shipping in the East. He's also been trying to undercut my routes for 2 years. He was fishing for information." "Yes, and sizing you up as a potential weakness." Dante looked at me. "You'll meet many men like him. They'll be charming, curious, seemingly harmless. They're mapping vulnerabilities. Don't give them any." "I didn't." "I know, you're smarter than they expect. That's useful." His jaw tightened. "But stay close at these events. Don't let anyone separate you from me or the security detail. These dinners aren't dangerous, but the people attending them can be." We returned to the hotel, different from Bucharest, but equally expensive. My room connected to Dante's through an interior door that I immediately locked from my side. I called the hospice before bed. Dr. Werner had adjusted grandmother's medications. She'd been lucid all afternoon, asking for me but content when told I was working. "She's proud of you," Nurse Claudine said. "She keeps telling everyone her granddaughter is doing important work." If only she knew what kind of work. I lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow I'd start learning sign language. Tomorrow I'd translate for more careful conversations. Tomorrow I'd continue pretending this was a normal job with a normal employer. But tonight, in the dark, I could admit the truth. Dante Corvino was not a businessman. He was something else entirely, something that operated in the spaces between legal and illegal, moving goods and people and money in ways that left no obvious trail. And I was helping him do it. The question I couldn't answer was whether I cared enough to stop. My sign language tutor arrived at 8, a woman named Alina who was deaf and patient and spoke through an interpreter for the first session. She taught me the alphabet first, then basic phrases. "Hello, thank you, please, how are you?" My hands felt clumsy, but Alina just smiled and corrected my positioning gently. After 2 hours, she gave me homework, videos to watch, signs to practice, and said she'd return tomorrow. Isabella came to the hotel at noon. Dante had meetings, so she and I had lunch in my room, sandwiches delivered from room service that she barely touched because she was too busy teaching me more signs. She was a better teacher than Alina in some ways, more animated, turning everything into a story. She taught me the sign for family, hands making a circle binding, for love crossed arms over the heart, for danger a sharp cutting motion. When I asked why she taught me that one, she wrote, "Because you'll need it. My son's world is not always safe." "I'm just a translator," I said. She smiled sadly and wrote, "No, you're the person he brought home, that's different." I didn't know what to do with that, so I changed the subject, asking about her art. She showed me photos on her phone, paintings of Cludge at different times of day, portraits of children signing, abstract pieces full of color and movement. They were beautiful, full of emotion that didn't need sound. "You could sell these," I said. She shrugged and wrote, "I paint for joy, not money. Dante makes sure I have what I need. He's generous that way, he takes care of the people who matter to him. And the ones who don't matter." She considered, then wrote, "He's less generous, but he's not cruel. He learned from his father that power without honor is just violence." Before I could ask what she meant, Dante returned. He looked tense, whatever his meeting had been about clearly not going well, but when he saw his mother, he softened slightly. She signed something and he actually laughed. He signed back, still halting but more confident than yesterday. She patted his cheek, kissed my hand, and left with a wave. "What did she say?" I asked. "She said you're a good influence on me, that I smile more when you're around." He loosened his tie. "And she warned me not to make you sad or she'll disown me." "She seems serious about that." "She is. My mother is the only person I'm actually afraid of disappointing." He checked his watch. "We have 2 hours before tonight's event. There's a gallery opening, cultural, not business, but there will be business people there. Wear something nice." He left through the connecting door. I stared at the wardrobe, at the clothes that kept appearing in my size, at the life that was being built around me whether I wanted it or not. That evening's dress was deep green silk that moved like water. The jewelry box held a pearl necklace that must have cost more than my old car. I put it on, trying not to think about how much I looked like someone I wasn't. The gallery was in Cludge's old town, a restored building with exposed brick and modern lighting. Art covered the walls, contemporary Romanian artists, pieces that ranged from beautiful to challenging. I recognized Isabella's style in several paintings. "She donated these," Dante confirmed. "She won't sell, but she'll give them to causes she believes in. The gallery supports young deaf artists." We moved through the space, Dante greeting people, me translating when needed. But mostly we just looked at art. I watched him study a painting of the Carpathians at sunset, something shifting in his expression. "My father was from the mountains," he said quietly. "A village so small it's not on most maps. He came to Cludge for university, met my mother, never went back. But he used to tell me stories about the mountains, about honor and old codes." "You miss him?" "Every day. He taught me that there are rules to this life, even when the life itself exists outside conventional rules. Don't harm civilians. Don't break your word. Take care of your own." He looked at me. "That's what I'm trying to do with you, Myra. Take care of my own." "I'm not yours." "Not yet, but you're becoming part of this, whether you realize it or not." Before I could respond, Nicolae Popescu appeared, champagne in hand, smile sharp. "Corvino, Miss Albu, what a pleasant surprise." 2 other men flanked him, younger, harder-edged. Dante's posture changed subtly, security detail moving closer. "Popescu, I didn't realize you appreciated contemporary art." "I appreciate many things: culture, beauty, opportunity, Popescu's eyes lingered on me. I heard you're working with Romanian contractors now, expanding operations. Diversifying markets change. Indeed they do. I've been thinking we should discuss a partnership. Your Western roots, my Eastern contacts. We could be quite effective together. Popescu's smile never wavered. Of course, partnerships require trust, shared interests. I'd hate for there to be any misunderstandings. It wasn't quite a threat, but it wasn't friendly either. I prefer my current arrangements, Dante said pleasantly, but I appreciate the interest. Think about it, these are uncertain times, it's wise to have allies. Popescu nodded to me. Miss Albu, a pleasure as always. He drifted away with his men. Dante's hand found the small of my back again, guiding me toward the exit. We're leaving, he said quietly to Stefan. What was that about? I asked in the car. Popescu is expanding his territory. He wants access to my networks, and when I refuse, he'll make problems. Dante stared out the window. Financial investigations, regulatory complaints, anything that makes business difficult without being overtly hostile. Can he do that? He has connections. Enough to be annoying, not enough to actually threaten me. But it means we need to be more careful. He looked at me. Starting tomorrow, you don't go anywhere without security. Not to see my mother, not to the market, nowhere. That seems excessive. It's necessary, you're visible now. Anyone watching me is watching you too. His expression was impossible to read. I should have thought of that before bringing you into this. I'm sorry. It was the first time he'd apologized for anything. I didn't know what to do with it. Back at the hotel, I expected him to disappear into his room. Instead, he poured 2 glasses of wine from the minibar and handed me one. I need to tell you something, he said. About the work we're doing, the shipping routes, the contracts, they're legitimate. Everything I've asked you to translate is legal. But the reason Popescu and others are interested is because my networks can be used for less legal purposes. I don't use them that way. I've built this business to stay clean, but the infrastructure is versatile. So you're not a criminal, but you could be. Something like that. My father built connections that straddled lines. When I inherited his organization, I moved everything I could into legitimate businesses. But the reputation remains, and men like Popescu see opportunity in that. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what you're part of, and because I don't want you to be afraid, but I need you to be careful. He set down his glass. In 2 days, there's a meeting in Milan. It's the biggest deal I've worked on, a logistics contract with a Swiss conglomerate. Completely legal, incredibly lucrative, and it cements my company as legitimate in ways that close old doors. I need you there to translate. After that, the work gets easier, safer. And if I say no, then I bring someone else, but I'd rather have you. You're good at this, Myra, better than you probably realize. His eyes held mine. And my mother likes you. That matters more than the business does. I sipped the wine, thinking. 2 days until Milan. Then what, back to Geneva? Would this strange interlude just end, leaving me with money and memories of a world I'd glimpsed but never really belonged to? I'll go to Milan, I said finally. But after that, we renegotiate. I want to understand exactly what I'm doing and what I'm not. Clear terms. Fair enough, he stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow we meet with Romanian suppliers. It's a long day. He went through the connecting door, leaving me with my wine and my thoughts. Outside, Cluj glowed in the darkness. Somewhere in that city, Isabella was probably painting, turning silence into color. Somewhere, Popescu was planning his next move. And here, in this expensive hotel room, I was becoming someone I didn't quite recognize. Someone who wore pearls and translated for dangerous men and didn't immediately run away when warned about threats. Grandmother would have called it bravery. I called it something closer to surrender. But surrender to what, I still couldn't say. The next morning brought the first real test. The meeting was in an industrial complex outside Cluj, warehouses and shipping containers, nothing glamorous. 5 Romanian men, all older, all watching me like I was a problem to solve. Dante conducted the meeting in a mixture of Italian and Romanian, but the technical terms needed precise translation. Import licenses, customs protocols, EU versus non-EU procedures. I translated carefully, catching the nuances that weren't quite said aloud. One of the men, heavyset with sharp eyes, asked a question that made everyone tense. And if there are delays at customs, inspections? Dante answered without hesitation. Then we wait. I don't expedite through unofficial channels. If your timeline can't handle legitimate processing times, this isn't the right partnership. The man leaned back, surprised. Most in your position prefer flexibility. I prefer not going to prison. Flexibility has a cost I'm not willing to pay anymore. Dante's tone was pleasant but absolute. I'm building something that lasts beyond me. That requires staying legal. The men exchanged glances. One of them, gray-haired and dignified, spoke. Your father would be proud. He always said honor was the only currency that held value. Dante's expression flickered, something raw and quickly contained. Thank you, he taught me well. The meeting ended with handshakes and agreements. In the car afterward, Dante was quiet. Did I mess up the translation? I asked. No, you were perfect. He stared at his hands. That man, Victor, knew my father, worked with him for 30 years. I didn't know he'd be there. What your father did, was it illegal? Not entirely, but not entirely legal either. He operated in gray spaces, taking care of his community, keeping people safe and employed. The law wasn't always relevant to the realities of life in these areas. Dante looked out the window. After he died, I was 17. People expected me to step into his role. I tried. For 5 years, I did what he did. Then I decided I wanted different, cleaner. So I've been slowly transitioning everything legitimate. But it takes time, and people have long memories. That's why Popescu sees you as competition. You're proving there's another way. Perhaps, or I'm just naive thinking I can walk away from what I was born into. His phone buzzed. He read the message and something in his posture changed. We need to go to the hospice. Dr. Werner wants to discuss your grandmother's prognosis. My heart stopped. Is she okay? He didn't say it was urgent, but he wants you there. We drove fast through Cluj traffic. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe properly. All I could see was grandmother's face, her smile when I'd last left her. At the hospice, Dr. Werner met us in his office. A kind-faced man in his 60s, German accent softening his Romanian. He gestured for us to sit. Miss Albu, your grandmother is stable. I'm not giving you bad news, he said quickly. But we need to discuss realistic expectations. The dementia is progressing. We can make her comfortable, we can give her good days, but we can't stop what's happening. How long? My voice barely worked. Months, not years. Perhaps 6, perhaps more. It's difficult to predict. He folded his hands. What I want to discuss is quality of life. She's expressed wishes through the earlier paperwork. She wants to stay aware as long as possible, even if it means more difficult moments. She doesn't want to be heavily medicated into oblivion. That sounds like her. Then we'll honor that, but I want you prepared. There will be hard days, days where she doesn't know you, days where she's frightened or confused. You'll need support. Dante spoke for the first time. She'll have whatever support she needs. Adjust the care plan accordingly. Dr. Werner nodded. I've taken the liberty of arranging for a Romanian-speaking counselor to be available, and I'd like to move her to a private room with more space for family visits. Mr. Corvino has already approved the costs. I looked at Dante. He wouldn't meet my eyes. After the meeting, we went to grandmother's room. She was awake, reading a magazine. When she saw me, she smiled, herself today, fully present. Myra Sicini esta sesta, who is this? A friend. His name is Dante. He helped arrange for Dr. Werner. She studied Dante with that sharp gaze that missed nothing. Then she spoke directly to him in Romanian. "You're Italian, but you speak our language well. Where did you learn?" "My father's business partners. He insisted I be fluent." Dante's tone was respectful, careful. "And what's your business with my granddaughter?" "I've employed her as a translator. She's very talented." "She is. She's also young and too trusting." Grandmother's eyes narrowed. "You seem like a man who knows how to use that." "Bunica," I said, embarrassed. But Dante smiled slightly. "You're right, I am, but I'm trying to do better." Grandmother considered this, then patted the bed beside her. I sat and she took my hand. To Dante she said, "Take care of her, or answer to me." "I'm more afraid of you than anyone else I'll meet," he said honestly. "I'll do my best." She seemed satisfied by that. We stayed for an hour talking about nothing important, the weather, the food, whether I was eating enough. Grandmother told stories about my childhood, embarrassing and sweet. Dante listened with something that looked like longing. When we left, she held my hand extra tightly. "This man," she said quietly in Romanian, "he's dangerous. Not to you, I think, but around him. Be careful, Draga." "I will. And remember, you can always come home. To me, to Geneva, anywhere. You're not trapped." But was I? With her care paid for, with Isabella's gentle friendship, with the strange gravitational pull of Dante's world, was I still free to leave? In the car, Dante was quiet until we reached the hotel. Then, "Your grandmother is extraordinary. She's been my whole world." "I know, that's why I'm doing everything I can to give you time with her." He turned to face me. "After Milan, if you want to end the contract, I'll understand. I'll make sure her care continues regardless. You've earned that." "Why?" "Because my mother was right. You have sad eyes and I don't want to make them sadder. Because your grandmother looks at you like you're her reason for living, and I understand that. And because—" he paused, something shifting in his expression. "Because you're important, and I'm trying to be the kind of man who protects important things." Before I could respond, his phone rang. He answered in Italian and his face went hard. "When? How many?" A pause. "Understood, increase security. I'll be there tomorrow." He ended the call. "Change of plans. We leave for Milan tonight instead of tomorrow. Popescu filed a complaint with Romanian financial authorities about my shipping licenses. It's harassment, but I need to handle it personally." "What does that mean?" "It means he's escalating, making things difficult in ways that are technically legal but practically hostile." Dante's jaw tightened. "Pack quickly. We leave in 2 hours." Everything moved fast after that. Dante made calls while I threw clothes into my suitcase. Stefan and Luca were suddenly everywhere, checking exits, coordinating with local contacts. The hotel became a hive of controlled urgency. Isabella arrived as we were leaving, her face worried. She signed something sharp and quick at Dante. He signed back, then pulled her into a hug. To me, she gave a piece of paper with a number. "My cousin in Milan. If you need help, call." The private jet was waiting. As we lifted off, kludge lights fading below, Dante finally spoke. "I'm sorry. This is my world dragging you into danger you didn't sign up for." "What kind of danger?" "Popescu won't hurt you, that's too escalatory, but he'll make things uncomfortable. Surveillance, financial investigations into anyone connected to me, pressure through institutional channels." He looked exhausted. "The Milan meeting is crucial. If it goes well, I have enough leverage to shut down his complaints. If it doesn't—" "Then what?" "Then things get complicated, and you'll have to decide how much complication you can handle." I stared out at the darkness beyond the jet's windows. A week ago, I'd been a waitress worried about rent. Now I was flying to Milan because a turf war between dangerous men had made me collateral. But grandmother's face flashed through my mind, her smile today, her lucidity. The private room, Dr. Werner's care, all of it bought by the man sitting across from me, looking like he carried the weight of mountains. "I'm going to the meeting," I said. "After that, we'll see." "Fair enough." He closed his eyes. "Wake me if anything happens." I watched him sleep, this man who'd bought his way into my life with kindness disguised as business, who cared for his mother but couldn't quite communicate with her, who'd inherited a criminal empire and was trying to transform it into something honorable. Outside, Europe passed below us in darkness. And somewhere ahead, in Milan, a meeting waited that would either free us or drag us deeper into the web Dante had been born into. I had no idea which outcome to hope for. Milan was rain-slick streets and early morning fog. We landed at dawn, drove through a city just waking, and arrived at a hotel that looked like it had been elegant when Leonardo da Vinci was painting. Our rooms overlooked the Duomo, all Gothic spires and impossible beauty. "The meeting is at 2, Dante said. "That gives you time to rest." But I couldn't sleep. Instead, I reviewed the contracts he'd left, understanding for the first time the scope of what he'd built. A logistics network spanning 8 countries, moving everything from automotive parts to textiles to electronics. The Swiss deal would legitimize it all, bringing in corporate money and regulatory approval that would make harassment from men like Popescu irrelevant. Everything hinged on this meeting. At 1, Dante knocked on the connecting door. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, and he looked every inch the international businessman he'd become. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." The meeting was in a conference room at the Swiss company's Milan office, all glass and steel and corporate minimalism. 3 executives waited, German and Swiss, their body language radiating skepticism. For 2 hours I translated while Dante presented. Routes, timelines, costs, legal compliance documentation. He'd prepared meticulously, and I could see them being convinced despite themselves. Here was someone who'd taken a family business and professionalized it, who spoke their language of logistics and efficiency. Then the lead executive, a Swiss woman named Dr. Keller, asked the question I'd been dreading. "Mr. Corvino, we've heard concerns about your family's historical business practices. How do we know this partnership won't expose us to liability?" The room went silent. Dante met her eyes without flinching. "My father operated in markets where the line between legal and necessary wasn't always clear. He took care of people when governments couldn't or wouldn't. I respect what he built, but I chose to build differently. Every document I've shown you today is fully compliant. I've spent 5 years restructuring specifically to avoid the kinds of liability you're concerned about. Check with any regulatory authority. My record is clean. But your associates are being chosen carefully. I don't control who my father knew or who contacts me. I control who I do business with and how." He leaned forward slightly. "You're not just buying logistics from me, Dr. Keller. You're buying my commitment to do this the right way. Because I have too much to lose now: reputation, future contracts, my ability to build something worth leaving to the next generation. That's a guarantee your other providers can't make." Dr. Keller studied him. Then she looked at me. "Miss Albu, you're relatively new to Mr. Corvino's organization. In your experience, have there been any practices that concerned you?" I felt every eye in the room on me. This was a test of my loyalty, of my honesty, of whether I'd lie to protect Dante's deal. "No," I said clearly. "Everything I've translated has been legal. Mr. Corvino has turned down opportunities specifically because they required questionable practices. He's building something clean and he's serious about it." It was true, and it was what sealed the deal. Dr. Keller nodded. "Then let's move forward. We'll send the contracts next week." Outside in the rain, Dante stood very still for a long moment. Then he turned to me. "Thank you. I told the truth. I know that's why it mattered." He looked up at the gray sky. "This changes everything. With this contract, I'm legitimate. Popescu can't touch me through regulatory channels anymore. I'm free. So what now? Now we celebrate. There's a rooftop restaurant near here. Best risotto in Milan, and a view that makes you forget why you were ever worried. Lunch was everything he'd promised, food that tasted like art, wine that warmed from the inside, and a view of Milan spreading out in all directions. For the first time since this strange journey began, Dante looked relaxed. "Tell me something," I said. "What do you actually want? Besides legitimacy and taking care of your mother, what drives you?" He considered, swirling his wine. "To build something that lasts. My father's legacy was loyalty and protection, but it died with him because it was personal, not structural. I want to create something that survives me. A company that employs people, moves goods, creates value. Something my children could inherit without inheriting criminality." He met my eyes. "What about you? What do you want?" "I don't know anymore. A week ago, I wanted to keep my head down and take care of my grandmother. Now I've seen things I can't unsee, been places I never imagined. I don't know who I am outside of being someone's granddaughter or someone's employee." "You're Myra, that's enough." "Is it?" I set down my glass. "Your world moves so fast. Everything is urgent, important, weighted with consequence. I'm just trying to keep up." "You're doing more than keeping up. You impressed the Swiss, you're learning sign language for my mother, you translated contracts that put us here." He leaned back. "You're stronger than you think, Myra. Trust me, I'm good at assessing people." We talked through the afternoon, the conversation drifting from business to stories about our childhoods, about books we'd loved, about the strange paths that had led us both to this rooftop in Milan. With each hour, he became less the dangerous figure from the restaurant in Geneva and more just Dante. Complicated, driven, carrying weights he'd never asked for. As sunset painted the Duomo gold, his phone buzzed. He read the message, and the easiness drained away. "What is it?" "Popescu, he's in Milan at the hotel." Dante stood. "We need to go now." The drive back was tense, security detail on high alert. At the hotel, Stefan met us in the lobby, face grim. "He's in the bar, alone but making noise about wanting to talk to you." "Let's get this over with." Dante looked at me. "Go to your room, lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you it's clear." "No," the word surprised me as much as him. "If this involves me, I should be there." "Myra, you said I'm part of this now. Then let me be part of it." He searched my face, then nodded sharply. "Stay behind me. Don't speak unless I tell you to." We found Popescu in the hotel bar, expensive whiskey in hand, that same sharp smile on his face. Two of his men flanked him. "Corvino and Miss Albu, what a coincidence." "There are no coincidences with you, Popescu. What do you want?" "To talk, to understand why you're so resistant to partnership. We could accomplish great things together." He gestured to the empty seats. "Please, civilized conversation between civilized men." Dante sat. I stayed standing behind him, watchful. "The Swiss deal," Popescu continued. "Congratulations. I heard it went well. That's the kind of opportunity I'm talking about. Imagine what we could do together, your contacts, my infrastructure. We'd own Eastern European logistics." "I'm not interested." "Why? Because you think you're better than the rest of us." Popescu's smile hardened. "Your father was a pragmatist. He understood that purity is a luxury. My father is dead. I make my own choices. Choices that leave opportunities on the table, that make you vulnerable." Popescu's eyes flicked to me. "You surround yourself with innocents, thinking they'll keep you honest, but they're just weaknesses waiting to be exploited." Dante's voice went very soft. "Is that a threat?" "An observation. Miss Albu is lovely, talented, and completely out of her depth. What happens when she realizes what you really are? When she understands the full scope of what your father built and what pieces you still maintain? She knows everything that matters." "Does she?" Popescu leaned forward. "Does she know about the warehouse in Constanta? the one that still processes your father's old contracts, the ones you haven't quite managed to close down. I felt Dante tense. Something in Popescu's words had struck home. Those contracts end next month. The warehouse transitions to legitimate operations only. If you say so, but reputations are stubborn things. The authorities might be curious why a man claiming to be fully legitimate still maintains connections to. He trailed off meaningfully. Well, you understand. This was the threat, not violence, but exposure. Using institutional channels to paint Dante's transition as incomplete, to undermine the legitimacy he'd just won. What do you want? Dante asked. A percentage, 20 points on your eastern routes. You keep your Swiss deal, I get access to your infrastructure. Everyone wins. And if I refuse? Then I help the Romanian and Italian authorities understand just how complicated your father's legacy really was. Even if you're clean now, the investigation would be expensive, time-consuming, and damaging. The Swiss might reconsider. Your mother might face uncomfortable questions. Popescu's smile was poison. But it doesn't have to be that way. Partner with me, and I make all those concerns disappear. The bar was silent, except for low jazz from hidden speakers. Dante stared at Popescu for a long moment. I need to think about it. Of course, you have until tomorrow night. After that, my concerns become official. Popescu stood. It's been lovely chatting, Miss Albu, always a pleasure. He left with his men. Dante remained seated, staring at his untouched drink. Is what he said true? I asked quietly. About the warehouse. Yes, it's a facility my father used for various purposes. I've been transitioning it to legitimate freight only, but some old contracts haven't expired yet. Nothing illegal is happening there now, but the paperwork trail would look suspicious to an investigator who wanted it to. So he has leverage. He has nuisance value. An investigation would be painful but not fatal. I could survive it, but my mother, his jaw tightened. She doesn't need that stress, and the Swiss deal could be endangered. So you'll partner with him? No, Dante stood. I'll find another way, come on. In his suite, he made 3 calls in rapid Italian, packing while he talked. When he finished, he poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me one. I have a plan. It's aggressive and not without risk, but it's better than surrendering to Popescu's extortion. What kind of plan? The warehouse closes tomorrow. I've called in every favor I have to complete the contract transitions early and shut down operations. It'll cost me money and goodwill, but it removes the leverage. Then I file a formal complaint about Popescu's harassment with the Italian and Romanian authorities. I have documentation of his threats, witnesses, a clear pattern of behavior. Even if he makes good on his threat to report me, his complaint will look like retaliation. Will that work? It should, but it means burning some bridges and making an enemy of someone who's dangerous in his own way. And it means, he set down his glass, it means relocating my mother temporarily, just as a precaution. Popescu won't hurt her, but he might try to use her proximity to me as another pressure point. Where would she go? Switzerland. I have a house in the Alps near Gstaad, isolated, beautiful, and very secure. She'll be comfortable there, but I need to ask you something. He met my eyes. Will you go with her? She trusts you, and I need someone I trust watching over her while I handle this situation. For how long? A week, maybe 2, until I know Popescu has backed off. His expression was unreadable. I'm asking a lot, I know. It's not in the contract, but I'm asking anyway. I thought about Isabella's kind face, her gentle teaching, the way she'd warned me to be careful. About this man who'd bought my loyalty with acts of service and was now asking for something beyond employment. I'll do it, I said, but on one condition. Name it. You tell me the truth, all of it. What your father really did, what you've really shut down, what's still in motion. No more careful omissions. If I'm protecting your mother, I need to know what I'm protecting her from. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Sit down, this will take a while." He told me everything. His father had been a logistics coordinator, yes, but for organizations that operated outside the law, moving goods for people who couldn't use legal channels, providing routes for everything from untaxed cigarettes to cash that needed washing. Not drugs, never weapons, but everything in the gray space between legal commerce and outright crime. When his father died, Dante had inherited a network of contacts, routes, and obligations. For 5 years, he'd maintained it, taking care of the people who depended on his father. But slowly, he'd started transitioning, closing the illegal routes, converting facilities to legitimate use, cutting ties with anyone who wouldn't go legal. The warehouse in Constanta was the last piece. Old contracts from his father's time, set to expire. Dante hadn't renewed them, but their existence on paper made his transition look incomplete. "I've built something clean," he said, "but the foundation is mud and compromises. Popescu sees that. He wants to drag me back into the mud because that's where he lives, and he's willing to hurt my mother to do it. So we protect her. Yes, and then I end this once and for all." He looked at me. "I'm sorry I brought you into this. If I'd known it would escalate this way." "You would have done it anyway, because you needed someone you could trust, and you saw that in me." I finished my wine. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow morning. I'll close the warehouse, file the complaints, then meet you in Gstaad once it's safe." "And Popescu?" "Let me worry about him." Something dangerous flickered in Dante's eyes. "I'm my father's son. I know how to fight when I have to." That night I couldn't sleep. I stood at the window, watching Milan's lights, thinking about how far I'd fallen into this strange world. A month ago, this would have seemed impossible. Italian turf wars, Swiss Alps refuges, protecting a deaf woman I barely knew from threats I didn't fully understand. But I'd said yes, because grandmother's care depended on it, yes, but also because some part of me was curious about what came next, about whether Dante could actually win against someone like Popescu, about whether I was strong enough to be what he needed me to be. A soft knock on the connecting door. I opened it to find Dante, still dressed, looking like he hadn't slept either. "I wanted to say thank you," he said, "for staying, for protecting my mother, for not running when most people would have. I don't run from things that matter. I'm learning that about you." He hesitated then. "When this is over, if you want to leave, I'll understand, but I hope you'll stay, not as an employee, as something else, someone who matters." "What does that mean?" "I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out." He stepped closer. "You're not what I expected, Myra. You're stronger, braver, more principled. You make me want to be better than I am." "You are better than you think." "Only because you're watching." He reached up, touched my face gently. "I shouldn't do this. You're not safe with me, but I'm going to do it anyway." He kissed me, soft at first, then deeper when I didn't pull away. His hand at the back of my neck, my fingers clutching his shirt. The kiss tasted like possibility and danger and all the things I'd been denying I wanted. When he pulled back, we were both breathing hard. "I'm sorry," he said. "That wasn't professional." "No, it wasn't." I touched my lips, still feeling him there. "Don't do it again unless you mean it." "I mean it. God help me, I mean it." He stepped back. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be long." He closed the door between us. I stood there, heart racing, knowing I'd crossed some line I couldn't uncross. Outside, Milan slept. And somewhere in the city, Popescu was making his plans, thinking he'd won. He had no idea who he was really fighting. The morning was all motion. Packed bags, early checkout, the car slicing through traffic toward the private airfield. Dante made calls the entire time, his Italian rapid and sharp. Shutting down operations, calling in favors, activating plans I couldn't quite follow. At the airfield, Isabella waited beside the jet, looking worried. When she saw Dante, she signed something quick and urgent. He signed back, then pulled her into a hug. To me, she signed, "You're keeping him from doing something stupid." I didn't know enough signs to answer properly, but I tried. "I'm trying." She smiled sadly and squeezed my hand. The flight to Switzerland was tense. Dante worked on his laptop while Isabella painted in a sketchbook she'd brought. I watched the landscape change below, Italy giving way to the Alps, all that impossible beauty hiding difficult terrain. The house in Gstaad was isolated, reached by a winding private road through pine forests. It was old, beautifully maintained, with huge windows overlooking mountain vistas. Security was discreet but obvious: cameras, high fences, guards who nodded as we arrived. "This was my father's retreat," Dante said as we entered. "He'd come here when he needed to think. Now it's my mother's when she needs safety." Isabella moved through the house like she knew it well, touching familiar things. She set up her art supplies in the sunroom, already making it her space. Dante showed me the security system, the emergency contacts, the protocol if anything seemed wrong. "Stefan and another guard stay with you full time. You don't leave the property. If you need anything, call me immediately." "When will you be back?" "As soon as I know it's safe. A week, maybe less." He looked exhausted. "Take care of her, Myra. She's all I have." "I will, and you take care of yourself." "I'll try." He kissed my forehead, a gentle promise. "Don't let her teach you any signs that will get me in trouble." After he left, the house felt very quiet. Isabella and I made lunch together, navigating communication with signs, gestures, and the occasional written note. She seemed content here, painting in the sunroom while snow began to fall outside. That evening we made dinner: pasta and salad, simple and good. She taught me more signs over the meal: safe, home, family, her hands moving with grace, turning silence into language. Before bed, she wrote me a note: "My son cares for you. Be careful with that. He doesn't let people close easily." "I'm careful with everything about him," I wrote back. "Good, he needs someone strong. His father was strong but died too young. Dante thinks he has to be hard to make up for softness inside." I thought about that as I lay in bed, the house creaking around me. Dante with his careful control and acts of service, trying to be the man his father had been while building something entirely different. Carrying weight he'd inherited and weight he'd chosen, and somehow making it look easy. My phone buzzed. A text from Dante: "Warehouse closed, complaints filed. Popescu threatening legal action but nothing concrete yet. How's my mother?" "She's painting, she's safe. Take care of yourself." "Trying, miss you both." The next 3 days fell into a pattern. Mornings learning signs with Isabella, afternoons reading while she painted, evenings cooking together and practicing conversation in a mix of Romanian and signs. The house was peaceful, the mountains beautiful, and the threat from Popescu felt very far away. But Dante's daily calls revealed a different story. Popescu had filed multiple complaints with regulatory authorities in Italy and Romania. The investigations were beginning, and while Dante's lawyers were confident, it was grinding and expensive. "He's making me bleed money," Dante said on the fourth day, frustration clear in his voice. "Even if I win, I lose resources and time." "Can you countersue?" "Already in motion, but it takes time and he knows that." A pause. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine. Your mother is teaching me to paint." "God help you, her standards are brutal." He laughed, but it sounded tired. "I'll be there in 3 days. The lawyers think we'll have preliminary rulings by then." "We'll be waiting." But that night everything changed. I woke to Stefan shaking my shoulder, face grim. "Movement on the perimeter. Could be nothing, could be a problem. Get Mrs. Corvino and go to the safe room. Now." My heart hammered. What kind of movement? Unknown vehicles, infrared signatures. Could be hunters, could be something else. Protocol says we secure you both. I ran to Isabella's room, woke her gently. She understood immediately. No panic, just quick motion. We followed Stefan to what looked like a wine cellar but was actually a reinforced room with supplies, communications, and a steel door. Lock yourselves in. I'll come get you when it's clear. If anyone but me opens that door, there's a panic button on the wall. It alerts Mr. Corvino and the authorities. The door closed, locked. Isabella and I sat in the dim emergency lighting listening. She took my hand, signed, "Okay." "Okay," I signed back. Above us I heard footsteps, voices in Italian, multiple people. Then gunfire, sharp cracks that made Isabella flinch. I pulled her close, covering her with my body, heart racing. The shooting stopped, silence terrible and complete. Minutes passed, felt like hours. Then footsteps descending. The door handle rattled. I reached for the panic button. "Myra, it's Stefan, we're clear. You can come out." I opened the door carefully. Stefan stood there, blood on his shirt but moving fine. Just a graze, they're gone. 4 men, professionals. They were running surveillance, not attacking. When we confronted them, they retreated. "Popescu." "Probably checking defenses, making a point. They knew you were here." His expression was dark. "I've called Mr. Corvino. He's on his way." Upstairs, the house looked untouched except for broken glass from one window. The other guard, Marco, was bandaging his arm where a bullet had grazed him. Everything had happened fast, professional, designed to intimidate without causing real damage. Isabella was shaking. I made her tea, sat with her while she processed. She wrote, "This is because of me. Dante's enemies use me." "No," I wrote back. "This is because bad men do bad things. You're not the problem." But she looked unconvinced. Dante arrived 3 hours later, driving himself, looking like fury contained. He went straight to his mother, held her, signed apologies and reassurances. Then he turned to me. "You're both leaving tonight. I have a flight to Geneva, then you're going to the hospice to stay with your grandmother. My mother is going to friends in Paris, people Popescu doesn't know about. You'll both be safe." "What about you?" "I'm ending this, tonight." Something dangerous lived behind his eyes. Popescu crossed a line. He involved my mother. That's unforgivable. "Dante, I know what you're going to say. That violence isn't the answer, that I should let the law handle it. But the law is slow and Popescu is fast, and I'm not waiting for him to actually hurt someone I care about." He touched my face. "I'm my father's son, Myra. I know how to fight wars the old way when I have to. I don't want you to become what you've been trying to escape." "I won't, but I will protect what's mine." He kissed me hard and desperate. "Go, take care of my mother. I'll call you when it's over." The flight to Geneva was silent. Isabella held my hand the entire time, both of us processing. At the airport, Dante's contact met us, a woman who introduced herself as Marie and promised to take good care of Isabella. At the hospice, I found grandmother sleeping peacefully. Dr. Werner had left notes about her good week, lucid days, comfortable nights. I settled into the chair beside her bed and finally let myself cry. Everything had escalated so fast. The warehouse, Popescu's threats, armed men at the Alpine house, and now Dante doing something that terrified me because I didn't know what it was. Whatever old codes his father had lived by, whatever methods existed in that gray world between legal and not. My phone buzzed at midnight. "Dante, it's done. Popescu won't be a problem anymore." I called immediately. "What did you do?" "Nothing illegal, but I found his weak point, financial improprieties that make my father's old contracts look like nothing. Tax evasion, fraud, misuse of EU funds. I gave the evidence to the authorities. He'll be too busy defending himself to worry about me." A pause. "Also, I may have made sure certain business contacts know he's unreliable. His reputation is destroyed. His organization will fracture. He's done." "That's it, just exposure." "What did you think I'd do, have him killed?" Dante laughed, but it sounded brittle. "I'm not my father, Myra. I don't solve problems with violence. I solve them with information and leverage. It's cleaner and it lasts longer. Where are you? Milan, watching everything unfold. The investigators raided 3 of his properties this afternoon. It's beautiful in a terrible way. His voice softened. How's my mother? Safe with Marie. How long before we can see each other? I have to stay here for a few more days, make sure everything sticks. Then I'm coming to Geneva. We need to talk about what comes next. After we hung up, I sat in the dark watching grandmother sleep. What came next? Back to waiting tables, continuing as Dante's translator now that the immediate danger had passed. Something else entirely. I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't go back to who I'd been before. That woman felt like a stranger, small and scared, hiding in invisibility. This version of me had learned to stand in the presence of dangerous men, had protected someone she cared about, had chosen to stay when leaving would have been easier. Grandmother woke in the early morning. When she saw me, she smiled. You came back. Always, how are you feeling? Tired but glad you're here. She studied my face. Something happened, you look different. A lot happened. I told her everything. The warehouse, Popescu, the Alpine house, Dante's solution. She listened without interrupting, her eyes sharp despite the dementia. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then, this man Dante, you love him. I barely know him. You know enough. I see it in your face when you say his name. She touched my cheek. Be careful, Draga. Men like him, they pull you into their gravity. It's exciting at first. Then one day you wake up and realize you've become someone you don't recognize. What if I like who I'm becoming? Then be sure it's who you choose to be, not who he needs you to be. She squeezed my hand. I won't be here much longer to guide you. Promise me you'll remember who you are. I promise. But I wondered if I knew any more. The girl who'd answered a phone call in Romanian felt like ancient history. In her place was someone stronger, braver, more complicated. Someone who'd learned to move through dangerous spaces with grace. Someone who'd kissed a man who lived between worlds and couldn't quite convince herself to regret it. Outside, Geneva woke to another cold day. Somewhere, Dante was winning his war. Somewhere, Popescu was losing everything. And here, in this hospice room, my grandmother was fatting while I was being reborn. The world kept turning, indifferent to all of it. 3 days later, Dante came to the hospice. He looked tired but lighter, like a weight had lifted. When he saw grandmother, he smiled, genuine and warm. Mrs. Albu, I'm Dante Corvino. Your granddaughter has told me so much about you. Grandmother studied him with that sharp gaze that missed nothing. The Italian who dragged my Myra into danger. Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry for that. Are you, or are you sorry she got caught up in consequences you created? But her tone wasn't harsh, just direct. Sit down, Dante Corvino. Tell me what your intentions are with my granddaughter. I wanted to die of embarrassment, but Dante sat calmly. I don't have clear intentions yet, he said honestly. I employed her because I needed someone I could trust, but she became more than that. She's brave and principled and sees through my carefully constructed walls. I care about her. Whether that's enough for anything more than caring, I don't know. At least you're honest. Grandmother looked between us. Myra, do you want this, whatever complicated thing it is? I don't know what it is yet, but yes, I think I do. Then I give my blessing, but Dante, her tone sharpened. If you hurt her, I'll haunt you. Dementia or not, I'll find a way. I believe you, and I'll try not to deserve haunting. He smiled slightly. My mother sends her regards. She says you raised your granddaughter to be stronger than me. That's because she is. Grandmother settled back, satisfied. Now leave us. I want to talk to Myra alone. Outside, I found Dante in the hospice garden, despite the cold. I sat beside him on a bench. Your grandmother is terrifying, he said. She likes you. If she didn't, you'd know. I'm honored. He took my hand. Popescu's organization is collapsing. The investigations found worse than even I knew. human trafficking connections, several murders. He's going to prison for a very long time, and the Swiss deal is moving forward without complications. I'm free, Myra. For the first time since my father died, I'm actually free. So what will you do with freedom? Build the company I always wanted, spend more time with my mother, learn to communicate with her properly, and, he turned to face me. If you're willing, keep you in my life, not as an employee, as a partner, in business and maybe more if we can figure out what more means. I don't know if I'm ready for more. Neither do I, but I'd like to find out together. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. The contract is complete. You've earned your full payment plus a bonus for the complications. But I have a new offer. Come work with me properly. Build the logistics company together. I need someone who understands both the Romanian market and has the principles to keep me honest. The salary is better than before and you'd have actual power, not just translating. I stared at the envelope. Inside would be enough money to secure grandmother's care indefinitely, to live comfortably, to choose my own path. Taking his new offer meant choosing him, his world, whatever we might become together. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need, but know that whether you work for me or not, your grandmother's care is covered. That's not leverage anymore, it's gratitude. Over the next week, I stayed with grandmother. Her good days were precious, full of clarity and stories and the kind of wisdom that comes from living fully. Her bad days were harder, confusion and fear that broke my heart. Dr. Werner adjusted her care again. We're keeping her comfortable, he said gently. That's all we can do now. Isabella came to visit, bringing flowers and paintings. She and grandmother communicated through me, but they seemed to understand each other despite the language barrier. Two strong women who'd raised children alone, who'd survived hard things, recognizing each other across the divide. Dante came every other day. Sometimes he just sat quietly while grandmother slept. Sometimes he and I walked the hospice grounds, talking about everything and nothing. Slowly, carefully, we were learning each other outside the pressure of danger and urgency. My mother asked about you, he said one afternoon. She wants to know when you're visiting again. She misses her sign language student. Tell her soon, I miss her too. She thinks we're already together, you know. She keeps making embarrassing comments about grandchildren. He laughed. I told her we're figuring things out, but she just smiles like she knows better. Maybe she does, she's perceptive. Too perceptive, like your grandmother. He stopped walking, turned to face me. I know this is complicated. My world, your grandmother's illness, the fact that I'm your employer whether you take the new position or not. But I want to try, Myra. I want to see what we could be if we're brave enough. I'm afraid, I admitted. So am I, but I'm more afraid of not trying. He touched my face. You make me want to be better than I am. That's rare. That's worth fighting for. I kissed him then, there in the hospice garden with snow beginning to fall. A kiss that tasted like possibility and promise, and the strange alchemy of two people finding each other across impossible circumstances. When we pulled apart, he was smiling. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. Ask me again when everything isn't so uncertain. Deal. But we both knew the maybe was already becoming yes. 2 weeks later, grandmother had a particularly good day. Lucid, happy, full of stories I hadn't heard before. She told me about her own grandmother in Romania, about traditions I'd forgotten, about the importance of choosing love even when it's complicated. That Italian of yours, she said, he's a good man under all the complications, like your grandfather was. You'll figure each other out. You think so? I know so. You're stronger than you think, Draga. You always have been. She held my hand. Promise me something. When I'm gone, don't grieve too long. Live, build something beautiful. Be brave enough to choose happiness. I promise. She died 2 days later, peacefully in her sleep. Dr. Werner called me at dawn, his voice gentle with condolence. Dante was there within an hour. He held me while I cried, made arrangements I couldn't think about, called Isabella, who came immediately. They both stayed through the funeral, through the terrible logistics of death, through the first raw days of grief. Grandmother had wanted a simple service. We held it at a small Romanian Orthodox church in Geneva, a handful of hospice staff and neighbors attending. Isabella signed prayers I translated aloud. Dante stood beside me, solid and present, letting me lean on him when everything felt impossible. At the cemetery, as they lowered her into the ground, I thought about everything she'd taught me. Strength is quiet. Love is action. Be brave enough to choose. I chose. 6 months later, I stood in Dante's office in Cluj, our office now, though he insisted it was more mine than his. The logistics company had grown, the Swiss deal leading to others. We employed 200 people across 4 countries, moving goods legally and efficiently, building the reputation Dante had dreamed of. Isabella's painting hung on the wall, a gift when I'd officially become partner. It showed the Carpathians at dawn, all possibility and light. "Ready for the quarterly meeting?" Dante asked, coming up behind me, arms wrapping around my waist. "As ready as I'll ever be." I leaned back against him. "Your mother wants to know when we're visiting. She says I'm neglecting my sign language practice. She just wants to meddle about wedding plans." "There are no wedding plans yet." "Yet I like that word." He kissed my neck. "Take your time, I'm patient." But his ring sat in my jewelry box, offered 3 months ago on a quiet evening in Geneva. A simple band with a single pearl, a beautiful chain I'd chosen to wear. I wasn't ready for marriage, not yet. But I was ready for partnership, for building something together, for choosing this complicated, brilliant, infuriating man every single day. Outside, Cluj spread across its hills in the afternoon sun. From this office, we coordinated shipments across Europe. We employed people Dante's father would have recognized, but doing work that was clean and legal and something to be proud of. It wasn't the life I'd imagined when I was waiting tables in Geneva, but it was mine, built through choices and courage and the kind of love that grows in unexpected places. "Myra," Dante's voice pulled me back. "The meeting." "Right, let's go." I grabbed my tablet, squeezed his hand. "Together. Always together." We walked into the conference room side by side, partners in business and life, building something that would last beyond us. The kind of legacy worth leaving. Outside, the mountains watched, ancient and indifferent. But inside, we were creating something new. Something that honored the past while refusing to be bound by it. And somewhere, I like to think, grandmother was smiling, proud of the woman I'd become, the brave choice I'd made, the warm home I'd chosen over cold anonymity. The end.